If there was one position group that Georgia really needed to upgrade in the 2025 recruiting class, it was the wide receiver position. And that's exactly why they brought in wide receiver coach James Coley to flip the room. He did exactly that. 3 4-star signees and Talon Taylor, CJ Wiley, and Landon Roldan. I think there's a lot of versatility within that group. In the 3-star ranks, you've got Tyler Williams, Thomas Blackshear, a couple of big body guys with some versatility. I think that it was really important to bring in significant numbers, 5 wide receivers, but also upgrading the talent in that room as well. You'd also be remiss to not bring up 5-star offensive lineman Juan Gaston, who recently jumped 90 spots in the final top 24/7 recruiting rankings. He really impressed down in Orlando at the Under Armour All-American game. That's Georgia's first 5-star offensive line signee since 2021 with Amarius Mims, and I think that's really critical for the Bulldogs going forward.
All right, Kirby Smart knows what he's doing, picking up the defensive talent. I just need to read this here. The number one defensive lineman in Elijah Griffin, the number one edge prospect in Isaiah Gibson, the number one linebacker in Zayden Walker. These are the top guys in the class. What impresses you most about what Kirby Smart was able to do to replenish that talent, that a lot of top talent leaving for the NFL?
Well, if you've been following Kirby Smart for as long as we have, you know that this is just another day, right, for Georgia. What they do, they reload in the trenches. But I want to go back to the point that you made about what they're losing, right? And even for Georgia, I think a lot of and a lot of fan bases and teams out there, you look at Georgia and you say you put them on a pedestal. Well, they have these guys every year, and they do. But Georgia's been impacted from this. They're going to lose Mykel Williams, who's a projected top 15 pick. They're going to lose Jalen Walker, who's working himself into a top 20 draft choice. And they're going to lose Malachi Starks, one of the best safeties in the country. Not to mention they're going to lose Dan Jackson as well. They went out, they got KJ Bolden last year. It is hard to find safeties. And I think a lot of people are going to point at, hey, well, Zachariah Branch, that was a really big pickup. Zion Branch, his brother, on the other side, and nobody's talking about this, it's not the most elite talent, and this was a guy that was really highly touted coming out. He had some injuries, but just even getting a guy that can plug in and be a warm body that they can count on, that can do a lot of different things, that's a big pickup too. So Georgia on the back end, who, like, let's face it, they weren't the same team that we've been accustomed to defensively at times last year. They looked very, very vulnerable. You turn on the tape against Mississippi State, and you're like, this is not a Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann type of team, right? They have been hurt by the portal and the new age college football. And the other thing we're going to get to, we're going to talk about the quarterback position. I mean, you think about offense, they lose Beck. Say what you want about him. Gunnar Stockton enters in. We'll talk about that in a second. You lose Trevor Etienne to the NFL as well. Arian Smith. You're losing a lot of production. And for Georgia, it's kind of been fascinating to see the way that they've been reacting to this. And this is a strong team built from a foundational core of high school recruiting. But they're in a 12-round bout, and they've kind of taken some jabs. And I think they're a little dizzy, and they're in the corner a little bit. I don't like betting against Kirby Smart, but in this new age of college football, they look more vulnerable from a roster standpoint than they have since I started watching this team a couple years ago. So Georgia right now, with a top 3 class, and we should be talking about all the good players that they got coming in because they got elite talent, and they're going to continue to do what they do on the front 7. Overall, I'm kind of fascinated kind of what this looks like in 2025.
You just assume that Georgia continues to replenish, but you look at this class, these guys might not be starting year one, but this looks like a pretty good group for Kirby Smart and company.
Cooper didn't even mention have to replace 4 starters on the offensive line. I mean, hey, Kirby has designed, the program is designed to rinse and repeat and replenish. And you are right. Some of these former pass rushers, you think about Damon Wilson that's at Missouri, you think about like Marvin Jones Jr., goes to Florida State, now he's at Oklahoma. The depth really isn't there. And I think that's going to put a lot of these young guys in the forefront. The good news, if you're a Georgia fan, how about Elijah Griffin, our number 3 ranked player with a grade of 100? Georgia's been kind of missing that dominating force right there in the middle, right there in the interior, really since Jalen Carter was in Athens, who's going to play for a Super Bowl this week. And Elijah Griffin, I think he's one of the safest prospects in the 2025 cycle, obviously given where we rank it, but I think he's someone that could step in and play right away. We had a chance to see him in Orlando at the Under Armour All-America game. I mean, he dictated the practices there in the game. kind of had a quiet first half, and then he came to life in the second half. And this is someone that has played a lower level of competition in the state of Georgia, but the year-over-year production, and the more you dig into the athlete, the way he's wired, Georgia isn't afraid to play some of these young guys. Like Kirby Smart will absolutely do it. They have a need up front in that front seven. And I think Elijah Griffin, you got to write him down as a potential true freshman All-American because Georgia needs him. And really, Cooper, I mean, a lot of the 2024s from last cycle that me and you were super high on in that recruiting class, it's their time. They're stepping into the spotlight. These guys need to be ready to go. Joseph Jonia-Ajanye, I know he's dealing with a knee injury right there on the defensive line. Gabe Harris at that jack position. Chris Cole at linebacker. Ellis Robinson, the former five-star cornerback. Like, these guys need to be ready to go. And you might be a little hesitant. I think that analogy was awesome about, the 12-round fight and where they're at. But I kind of believe in what Georgia's doing. And I think this group, given everything they're losing, they're still in position to be competitive.
So we expect Gunnar Stockton to now be the guy at quarterback with Carson back off to Miami. Who does he have around him? Okay, we don't. Wait.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. New quarterback starting for Georgia next season. What does he have around him?
Well, first of all, I'll talk about him, and he deserves all the credit in the world for stepping in the second half of that SEC championship game, willing his team to a victory against Texas. And I thought he played well, really, against Notre Dame, too. I don't think you look at Gunnar Stockton and say, hey, this guy's the issue. Here's the issue. You look at the receiver position. They bring in Zachariah Branch. They bring in Noah Thomas. Last year, they lose Brock Bowers. They lose Ladd McConkey. And you had a guy in Arian Smith who can run with anybody, but the hands were an issue. You think about what they had. London Humphreys, the production's not there yet. Dylan Bell, they were plagued with drops. And quite honestly, if you want to look at Carson Beck, you can point at a lot of their lack of ability at the receiving corps. They've invested heavily there at the receiver position. And Zachariah Branch, I'll tell you right now, for the high hopes that we had about him, he's a dynamic player. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how they scheme him up in that offense. Noah Thomas, I might be more excited about and kind of how he fits that big target coming over from A&M, 6'6". And these tight ends, Drew, we keep talking them up. We talk about this, one of our favorite groups. They got to step up. Oscar Delp, we've been talking about him. Lawson Lucky. These guys are really talented players that have a lot of ability, but Mike Bobo's got to find a way to get the tight ends and 12 personnel back in that offense. And I'm excited of a full dose of Nate Frazier going into year 2 as well. So Georgia, like Drew said, they're incredibly capable, but they also feel like a team that's been at the top for so long, and they've been in the college football playoff. The other thing that I don't think people account for, these are long seasons from a scheduling standpoint where you go from a national championship, which they're in contention every year, to now the calendar just goes on and on and on. They haven't been able to catch their breath. I think that's something to kind of take into consideration here. And the game changes every year. It's like the ground beneath your feet. You don't know what you're standing on. And I think Georgia, all of a sudden, they're looking up and they're saying, wait, what? How's this work? What are we supposed to do? So the expectation, the standards up here, that's not going to dip because they got the right guy at head coach, and he's relentless. But this is, like I said, it's gut check time for them.
Yeah. What's your take on the offense?
Well, I threw the time out there because, everything Cooper said about Gunnar Stockton, right? Mm-hmm. But to me, Gunnar Stockton looked like the Gunnar Stockton we saw as a senior in high school. I think there's some limitations with him. I'm not writing out Ryan Puglisi there in Athens. Former Elite 11 quarterback. Georgia, they were really high on when they signed him. He showed up in Athens. He was a little bit dinged up. He was a multi-sport guy. I went back and I pulled out my notes of his high school evaluation. I revisited the senior tape, and he is someone that can beat you with his legs. Same with Gunnar Stockton, but I'm under the impression, just kind of watching what Georgia has done on the recruiting front at that quarterback position, they want to get a little more athletic. I get that sense based on where some of these recent offers have gone out. Some of these guys they've kind of targeted. They want to get a little bit more mobile. Gunnar Stockton can do it. Same with Ryan Puglisi, who has one of the better nicknames out there, Pug. I'm just saying, don't be surprised if we get into spring practices and it's not all just, hey, Gunnar Stockton's our guy. I mean, Kirby Smart wants to create competition. I think Ryan Puglisi, as he enters in year 2, needs to factor into all of this when we talk about the offense.
Yeah, you think about the quarterbacks, too. I mean, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, before Riley Leonard ran the ball 9 times in that opening drive and obviously was dinged up a little bit after that. That running component, even if it's circumstantial or situational, being able to have that ability as an offensive coordinator to have that to lean on, especially in those type of critical games, just to give the defense something else to think about. I think that's a critical component that you have to take into consideration.
Certainly a lot of change for the Georgia Bulldogs, and our friends at Dogs 24/7 will have you covered on everything that is happening with Georgia in this crazy offseason.